Hello. Thank you for joining in today. I know, sweetheart, don't get in that broadcast. Quick broadcast for people who are noticing the influx of increasingly terrifying news about the pandemic currently sweeping the world. So there are reported cases of young people in their 20s and 30s who have the coronavirus and are being treated in intensive care units and are in critical condition, even though they don't have any underlying conditions. So yes, it's quite concerning. And whilst I'm not going to spend too much time pointing fingers at the president who neglected to take on board the tests from the World Health Organization, well, sweetheart, this is not the time, and you're going to lose a sticker if you keep that up, okay? You may play with your doll's house. You may have 5 more minutes to play, okay? I know you want to bake muffins, but we're not going to bake muffins until Mummy's done a quick broadcast. So one thing I wanted to share with people was a publication from Science magazine that said, okay, you've lost a sticker, Baba. If you want to get it back, you better go and do the right thing quickly, sweetheart. Where's your brother? Go play. So you're laughing because, yeah, I've got built-in mockery. It's going to be 2 stickers in a minute. I'm going to count to 5. Go. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's it. That's better. Yeah, no, that's my comic foil, really. Children who I am homeschooling in order to maintain social distance, who insist on being part of the broadcast. But yes, so let's cross to what I wanted to share with people. So I'm going to go to my messages so that I can share these things. So I think 30 New York police officers have just been diagnosed with coronavirus as well. So that now that people do have access to testing, there's a lot fewer undiagnosed cases, but there's still likely to be a significant number of cases. Now, we're looking at this study, which it was published in sciencemag.org. So despite being less infectious than symptomatic or identified cases, people who so obviously have the flu that they're tested, or a version, it's not the flu, but something resembling the flu that they get tested, those people are actively infectious or more obviously infectious because they're spreading droplets, they're coughing and sneezing. But the asymptomatic people are still making a greater contribution in a numerical sense to overall transmission of the disease from person to person, because they're the undetectable zombies of the population. They spread the contagion. We spread the contagion. Who knows at this point who has it? Who knows the breadth and reach of this virus in our communities? So I'd like to draw people's attention back to a few weeks ago when there was a whistleblower from the Department of Health and Human Services who noted that the Trump administration had sent staff from DHHS to meet with returning repatriated Americans from Wuhan in China, and had given them inadequate training and inadequate protective gear. So those people noticed the CDC staff who were also standing around in full hazmat suits, protective gear, and these staff felt concerned. They finished their assignments at the Travis Air Base in California. Actually, where's Travis Air Base? That is California, and there was another air base in Texas as well, where again, DHHS staff was sent to deal with repatriated Americans from outbreak areas without adequate protective gear to stop the transmission, to break transmission chains. So those staff would have been interacting with migrants. It's highly likely that Trump has already infected migrants in the camps. I'm just going to suggest, without pointing to studies now, that it's quite likely people who have no income may start looting if they don't have any source of income anymore. So if we don't start organizing community administered hardship relief packages, like literally appointing a local person to run a GoFundMe or something more immediate, like pass out their account details for everybody to put into, or opening an account for people to all put into to take care of the impoverished in each community. And wealthy communities will have to adopt a sister or brother community in a less well-off part of America, because the federal government is interested in maintaining chaos. If the country is looting and in such significant hardship that they can't administer an election, then that's a benefit for Trump. It's a benefit for Trump if the country descends into chaos, because Biden is likely to beat him at the polls. And for Trump, an electoral defeat isn't an electoral defeat, it's a jail sentence. And criminals are not known for going quietly to jail, particularly hardened criminals who've been evading the law for years, who have been participating in money laundering crimes, who've been potentially engaging in the sex trafficking of children and young women for decades. They're not quietly or easily going to allow an opportunity for them to be forced to relinquish power. And that's an unsettling consideration, but consider it we must. My husband accepted a job offer in the US that we're not going to take at present. Well, he's going to do the job remotely, but it's quite probable we'll never move. I'm just wondering about when the US could potentially return to some degree of normality. And normal has changed forever, but how much are we going to be sunk in apocalyptic territory? How much will we turn to our worst animalistic selves when millions of people die, when the death toll exceeds that of the number of people killed in all the world wars and the war of and the Vietnamese War, etc. If everybody loses somebody in their family, and people in impoverished communities lose a lot of people. So Kazich is saying Travis is near Sacramento, California, and there was another airbase that people were sent to as well. Someone called Clyde Allen is saying the government will send out checks and churches will help out. Yes, but the scale of this disaster is probably beyond many people's comprehension at this point. If 70% of the population are infected and 20% of that population require 1 or 2 or 3 weeks in intensive care units, the hospital system can't function. It can't treat victims of accidents. It can't treat pregnant women with complications. It can't treat children who have a fall or a poisoning instance. Yes, I may need to stay away from the US for a long time. Somebody points out that Trump was a Democrat. Yes, and I'm not so partisan that I am unable to acknowledge that when Donald Trump was a Democrat, he was a criminal then also. He was a criminal as a Democrat and a criminal as a Republican, but Republicans gave him more power over the American people and more power over the world. And they gave him the nuclear codes, and they refused to allow witnesses at his impeachment trial in the Senate, and they refused to impeach him, except for Mitt Romney, who did his duty. No, I'm not talking about the people from the cruise ship. I'm not talking about the Diamond Princess returnees. I'm talking about American citizens who were in China, in Wuhan, and they were evacuated, put on planes, and infected people were put on the same plane as uninfected people, but in a contained cabin area. But still, they were on a plane with uninfected people. And all of those people who'd been exposed to Wuhan, which was the center of the disease outbreak. And they were taken to 2 different air bases, Travis Air Base and in California, and another air base as well. So I'll bring up the article for people who aren't familiar with it. There's a number of articles on this particular topic. Whistleblower. Okay. Let's see how much detail the New York magazine has about it. Okay, I'm going to share. How's the volume, you guys? Is that working for people today? If 20-year-olds start to realize that there are 20-year-olds in critical condition in Dallas hospitals. All right, so it looks like you can see that. So the headline here, people might be able to read. It says, whistleblower, US health workers treated quarantined coronavirus patients without proper training. The employees from the Department of Health and Human Services were tasked to receive Americans evacuated from Wuhan without proper training or protective gear. Afterwards, the workers who did not show symptoms of infection were allowed to go home without being tested for the virus. At least one of the staffers left California on a commercial flight. So that article was published on February the 27th. I don't know the date of when the workers were, when Americans were repatriated from China, but we can find it out. Americans repatriated from Wuhan, China. So that was being reported on. 195 Americans evacuated from Wuhan. Let's have a look. Okay, so in order to let you guys see what I'm seeing, I'll have to close this and share a new screen. Okay. So that was published on the 31st of January. So there were probably, here we go. So some people were evacuated and arrived at Ted Stevens Anchorage International Airport on January the 28th. So whistleblower stories are published February the 27th, 1 month later. I would like to have people go back to that whistleblower story and report on it. And if any of you can help out with that, if you copy this article, copy and paste the whistleblower article, Google your own articles by putting in the term whistleblower, DHHS, Wuhan, should be enough to get you a number of articles on the topic. And take that article, copy that link, post it to the Twitter accounts of reporters in an effort to get them to do a follow-up story on what has happened to that whistleblower and what has happened to those DHHS colleagues who weren't tested for the coronavirus. Have they now been tested? How much were they then sent to interact with migrants in detention centers? Okay, so that article is from Scientific American, just giving me a date of January the 31st that people were repatriated from China. I'll remove that and return to my New York Magazine article. Let's have a look at the details here. So the complaint also states that HHS officials dismissed the staff as health concerns, claiming they were hurting staff morale. They were accused of not being team players, and they had their mental and emotional stability questioned. So here we go. Travis Air Force in Solano County. So that's in California. and the March Air Force Base in Riverside County. Who knows where the March Air Force Base is? Where's Riverside County? Let's find out. Which state? Riverside County. That's also in California. Okay. I heard that there was another base as well, potentially in Texas. So Chris Hayes is a journalist who's been specifically reporting on it. He will be a good one to ask for follow-up. So Trump repatriated infected Americans over the objections of the CDC, and Trump's HHS then sent federal workers to interact with the exposed population. I don't know that they were infected. Infections weren't confirmed. Were they interacting with both infected and exposed but non-diagnosed people? All right. This is also the alarming news that the UK recently realised that its herd immunity plan was going to lead to millions of deaths. Yes. All right. Well, I'm going to go play with my children and bake muffins. There's some comments here that I haven't seen. We've all agreed that Trump is a criminal, yes, and have potentially contributed to the decimation of the American public. Quick question, what happened with the fires in Australia? They're no longer threatening lives or properties. Rain happened. We usually have a bushfire season, but it's usually for 3 months of the year, not 6 months. So the bushfires became international news because they were unprecedented in scope and scale. And people even now are still finding burned and starving koalas in the Australian bush, simply because so many hectares, thousands upon thousands of hectares of land were burnt that it wasn't possible for human monitoring or salvage operations for wildlife to occur, or at least there wasn't the intent and the motivation for people to do that. So people who go to those places now are finding starving wildlife, which is unsurprising. Over 1 billion animals were estimated to have been killed by the bushfires, and there's regrowth, but the degree of devastation is significant. It forebodes what will happen increasingly in countries around the world because of climate change. When you have that hotter temperature, even places previously immune to fire become flammable, become tinder. So the rainforests in Australia, which are wet, they're rainforests. The title tells you the nature of the forest. They became so dry that they too burned, and they don't have evolved mechanisms for rehabilitating themselves as much as other types of drier type of, we call it bushland. Bushland can regenerate after a fire, but rainforests not so much. Brian's got another Air Force for me. Joint base in San Antonio, Lackland in Texas. So that was another base then, I guess, where repatriated Americans were taken. The herd immunity plan in the UK was crazy and irresponsible. Yes, indeed. Well, thank you for your help, everybody. Thank you for being part of today's broadcast. Take care of yourselves and each other, and expect hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of people to potentially perish as a consequence not only of a disease, but of some purposeful and some inadvertent government negligence that amounts to mass manslaughter on an enormous scale. And take care. At least the children will probably be okay. The people in their 20s getting in critical condition in Dallas, I don't know, but I wonder if it's been said they had no underlying conditions, but I'm wondering if the prevalence of vaping might contribute to respiratory compromise that could exacerbate people's response to the virus. 2.2 million dead in the US, or is that globally? Possibly 2.2 million dead in the US is the latest statistic that Brian seems to be telling me he's seen. It's a lot just in the US. Wow. So if this base was visited by repatriated Americans with coronavirus, and the Department of Health and Human Services sent people without protective gear to interact with those repatriated Americans from the area of Wuhan in China, and then those federal employees distributed the virus to other people. This is the stuff of science fiction movies about pandemics. I don't watch those movies, so I don't really know how they unfold because I avoid horror movies and I have done so for years. But I would imagine this is probably how it played out. People ignoring evidence. Did they have criminals in them who purposefully delayed testing and sabotaged testing? Or was that seen as too far-fetched to include in a movie about a pandemic? It is quite depressing. It's a good time to start loving one another in terms of, I'm not talking about coitus as a response to tragedy. I'm talking about care for one another and care for other communities as well. Why do you keep updating? Sorry, I just noticed some articles that seem like they're updating and I don't need them. Okay. Well, as I said, take care, everybody. We'll do what we can. And we better be prepared to cope with a brave new world. And I don't know how or what forms that will take. But there could be looting, there could be just crumbling of societal standards, and there could be martial law with the National Guard sent to areas and people forcibly imprisoned for showing signs of disease. These are scenarios I don't like to entertain, but I am now beginning to entertain them. So let me know of any positive information you hear as well as negative, because we need to know, we need to be brave and face the problems that lie ahead together. Thank you and goodbye for now. For now. Bye. Stay safe.